Have you ever put someone in their place? When we use that phrase, to put someone in their place, usually it's directed towards someone who's grown too big for their boots. They become arrogant and presumptuous. Maybe they think that they're more important, more deserving, more entitled than they actually are. And to put them in their place is to cut them down to size. It's the tall poppy syndrome, to show that they are not so special after all. Now, I've used that phrase today as part of the title of my sermon, Putting Jesus in His Place. But I've done that simply to get your attention. When I talk about putting Jesus in His place, I'm actually thinking the complete opposite of what we might do as people. Because I think the problem is that we don't treat Jesus as nearly as important as He deserves. We don't give Him the respect that He deserves. He deserves far more honour than we ever give to Him. And the reason for that, as I've been saying over the past couple of weeks, is a failure to be growing in our knowledge of God. Because one thing comes home to us as we grow in our knowledge of God, and that is quite simply how inadequately we treat Jesus. Now, this passage divides into two sections. The first is about Jesus as the God of the universe, and the second is about Jesus, the God of the universe, getting his hands dirty in things of this world. And then the passage wraps up with a warning about the importance of keeping Jesus in his right place. So first, verses 15 to 17 declare Jesus to be the image of God, the firstborn over all creation, the creator and the sustainer of all things. In effect, Jesus is the God of the universe. Now, when people think about God, they think of a being who is spirit, who is invisible, who is unapproachable. And on our own, any understanding we have of what God is like is always going to be guesswork. It'll be limited, hazy, speculative, because God is invisible, because God is unapproachable. But that is, of course, without Jesus. Because when Jesus in this passage is described as the image of God, it means firstly that he is God, it's this language of creator and sustainer. But secondly, that he is like a lens that brings God into sharp focus so that we can see him as he really is. It's like when you're at the shop and you need to read the small print on the back of a packet of food and you need your reading glasses to do it. Or in my case, because I never take my glasses with me, I'm too vain, I actually get out my phone and open up the camera app and use that to zoom in on the writing. Sometimes I'll even take a photo and then I can zoom in on that photo. And then those unrecognisable black squiggles suddenly turn into letters and words that make sense to me. Jesus, the image of the invisible God, is our photo, our camera, through which we see God. We can zoom in, and God then starts to make sense in a way that he never did before. Every purely human attempt to see and understand God, and I think that's what the world's religions are, human attempts to approach and to understand and even to try and control God, every human attempt to reach God is like trying to read a label without reading glasses when we need to wear reading glasses. So we hold the packet out at arm's length and we tilt it to get the light just right. And we screw up our eyes to try and find a point where things will come into focus. They used to work for me, but even now even that doesn't work. If we want to know God, we have to know Jesus. If we want to introduce someone to God, the only way to do it is to introduce them to Jesus, because he is the lens who makes the invisible God clear and visible in a way that every other human attempt to understand, to find God, fails completely to do. And what does all this achieve? It puts us in our place. Despite what we might like to think, we are not at the centre of the universe. And it challenges us to put Jesus in his right place, at the very centre of everything, as the sole object of our worship and our praise, because he is the image of the invisible God. That's the first picture of Jesus, the cosmic Jesus. But the second image of Jesus here in verses 18 to 20 is to bring this cosmic Jesus, the creator and sustainer of everything, into the realm of our human experience. So that the very same one who created and sustains everything is the one who was born and lived and died and rose again in human history. And why would he do that? Why would the infinite, perfect creator of all things enter human experience? Verse 20 tells us, to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. By entering human history, Jesus revealed the heartfelt desire of the invisible God, that we should have peace with him, that we should be reconciled to him. And that's something that we all need. Verse 21, once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behaviour. Now, alienation is a relational word. It implies the breakdown of a relationship. It implies separation, loneliness, isolation. Jesus came into this world to do away with those things, to restore our broken relationship with God. Now, as people who've been Christians, often for many years, we tend to think of that in a past sense. Once we were not in a relationship with God, but then we met Jesus and he saved us. And we were reconciled with him, but that's now past, finished, complete. We don't need to be reconciled anymore. Is that right? Well, yes and no. Yes, we are now at peace with God through faith in Jesus. But what do we know about relationships in general? They're never static. They're either growing or they're dying. Every successful marriage, for example, takes work. If we neglect the relationship, if we give other activities in our lives a higher priority, or if heaven forbid we flirt with other people, we are putting that marriage relationship at risk. And the same is true of our relationship with God. If we take that for granted, if we neglect its responsibilities, if we give everything else in our lives a higher priority, if we dabble in relationship with other gods, then that relationship will wither and it will die. But if we invest in it, it flourishes. We never stop needing the reconciling work of Jesus to keep our relationship with God on track. And I think that's why the passage ends with a warning. In verse 22, he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation, if you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. Now, how are those verses a warning? There's a warning in the sense that we'll only be holy and without blemish and free from accusation when we stand before God in the future, if we remain firm and established in the faith in the present. What happens is that we can almost subconsciously separate our future with God from our present lives in the here and now. And we're happy for God to be responsible for the big picture stuff, for our eternal future, for heaven. But we live in the real world. We live in the world of terrorist bombings, of serial killings, of gang wars, of floods, cyclones, bushfires, earthquakes, drought, disease, illness, injury. And in so many of these things, God appears to be either absent or powerless or unconcerned. Which means that in the present, in the here and now, we're in charge. We're responsible for our security, for our well-being, for our prosperity. But that's not putting Jesus in his rightful place. It's actually putting ourselves in his place. It certainly contradicts Colossians 1, which teaches that the same Jesus who handles the cosmic issues has entered our world and is present and active and at work in every part of life in the here and now. So he is present in our sickness. He is present in war. He is present in natural disaster. And if we trust him enough to take care of our eternal future, then surely we can trust him enough to take care of our present. And if we don't, then I think in the language of verse 21, we are at risk of alienating ourselves from God all over again. In summary, Jesus is the image of God, the firstborn over all creation, creator and sustainer of everything. In effect, he is the God of the universe. He is at the centre of the universe, and everything depends on him. He is at the centre. We are not, which means he must be the sole object of our worship and our praise. But this same Jesus, the God of the universe, has also entered the realm of our human experience. He's come into our lives to restore our broken relationship with God. But just because of who he is, the Lord over everything. He can't be constrained to the religious part of our lives. He can't be constrained to the time we spend together in church on a Sunday. No, when the infinite creator came into this world, he came into every part of it. Every part of life, every action, every situation, every experience of life. And he is Lord over them all. And he calls on us to trust him as Lord over them all. Not just for our eternal future, but in everything. We need to put Jesus in his right place.